Hello everybody and welcome to today's Sunday sermon, which is the fourth week in Easter, and it's known as Good Shepherd Sunday. And we know that Jesus explained that the Good Shepherd looks after his sheep, and even the one that gets lost from the herd, he goes off and finds it and brings it back. We see Paul and Barnabas in the first reading traveling around the world, as it was known at that time, preaching to the Gentiles, meaning people who have never heard the gospel and people who are non-Jewish, but also Jewish people who were living in those countries. They were preaching to the lost sheep. So in the same way, we look at our world today and we say, who are the lost? Am I lost? Yes, I'm lost in my sin. And I am trying to ask God for forgiveness at all times. But there are also others who have gone away and strayed away and don't even want to come back. Maybe it's because of the darkness of the world. There's a dark side to our world, as we know. Accidents happen, sickness happens, disasters happen, wars happen, as we know so well at this time. Ukraine at the moment and around Africa, there are wars going on constantly, and terrible inhumanity, inhuman actions towards innocent people. This is a dark world, and this can make us feel lost and feel there is no God. But Jesus is seeking us out. There is also many of us who feel unworthy and maybe don't feel part of a community, like the refugees, or maybe people with a poor self-image who don't fit in somehow. These are lost people as well, and who feel there's no hope for them. Jesus is reaching out to all like that as well. And then we have in our world a sense of materialism and secularism. Secularism meaning that we don't want religion affecting our lives. And the hope is that religion will not be an issue as societies develop, as they call it. So we have this kind of philosophies and making people lost in those. These are the people as well. Also, there is a lack of people like Paul and Barnabas who are willing to go out there and preach the word. The lack of priests and nuns and brothers and leaders and lay missionaries. There is that kind of a liturgy towards anything to do with religion. There are also people who are poorly indoctrinated or taught in the Catholic faith and in the Christian faith, who have a very little knowledge of it. It's more and more so now, a poor catechism, and where people don't really understand the gospel. And then you have the young people who leave the church. They say 64% of young people leave the church, all the Christian churches, at some time, and maybe during their 20s. They might come back and they might never come back. So these are lost people as well. We have to reach out. Jesus wants to reach out to them. There is also disappointment with the church, the abuse cases. There's also maybe the church is being accused of materialism and also not being available where there is great need, not being there where the church and where the gospel needs to be preached. It's a kind of a depressing picture, but the good news is that Jesus is alive and risen from the dead, and he is active in our world, and he's bringing people back in spite of us, and he's there waiting for us to come back like the prodigal son. Christ is still at work, and he seeks out the lost. There's a great story of a great poet towards the end of the 1800s, named Francis Thompson. Francis grew up in a Catholic home, and his father was a doctor, and he wanted his son to become a doctor. But Francis was more interested in the literary world, and he loved Shakespeare. But he obeyed the father's wishes and went off to London to medical school. But he dropped out, and he took on little menial jobs around London, and eventually he became homeless. He was in a shoemaker's shop at one stage, and then he was, for 3 years, he was selling matches that you light cigarettes with. He was also begging for money, and then he had a drug problem. So the man became very down and out, but he spoke with a beautiful accent, and you would know that he was something special when he opened his mouth. But he looked terrible. He was haggard and had pain written all over his face, and he was a man who was near self-destruction. Indeed, he tried suicide. Then he was rescued by a convert to Catholicism and an editor of a magazine, a Catholic magazine, by the name of Wilfrid Meynell, and some more friends as well that he had. They rescued him and they took him to a monastery to recuperate. And then he started writing. His poems were published, and his famous one is called The Hound of Heaven, which is to do with his life. It was the story of his life, how he avoided God during his time on the streets and in London especially, where he ran away from God as best he could and tried to stay with the pleasures of this world. But God took off after him like a hound or a dog running after an animal like a hare or a rabbit. He took off with speed, and this is what God does for us all. He takes off when we are lost and runs after us, and we keep running, and also avoiding him and trying to weave and bob so that he cannot catch us. And what does he want to do? He won't devour us and kill us and annihilate us like the dog, but he will fill us with divine love and happiness and real meaning for our lives. We learn from the example of Francis Thompson's life that God seeks us out, all of us. And we needn't be depressed when we look around and we see anti-religion and where we see people behaving as if there is no God and that there is no death. But God is seeking out everyone. So that is the God that we hear about in today's gospel. I am the good shepherd, Jesus says. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd, as we know, looks after his sheep. We have the great imagery of the Holy Land, and it's true, it seems. The shepherds out in the mountains with their flocks of sheep. When it comes night, they all go to a cave, one cave, and they enter the cave with their sheep, various herds and various flocks of sheep. And in the morning, individual shepherds go outside the cave and they call the sheep, their sheep, from their flock. And those sheep know their voices, and they know the call, they recognize, and they come out and they come to him. And it's amazing to see the shepherd going off over the hill with his sheep behind him. We can't imagine, because we think you need to push sheep ahead of you, but in this case the sheep follow. It's a beautiful image that Jesus gives. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. And in fact it is true. We know what is right and what is wrong. We know what brings us happiness and what doesn't. We know that if we delve in human pleasures and the pleasures of the world, that they will not bring us lasting joy. The only joy that lasts forever is the joy with the Lord, in giving of ourselves, in loving others, in spreading the good news through our witnessing, and maybe sometimes we can talk, but generally speaking, it's the way we live our lives and how we approach the challenges of life. We know that the Good Shepherd is coming to rescue us. So that is what we are learning today on Good Shepherd Sunday. May God bless you and help you to experience this in your life. And may you have a beautiful Sunday and a grace-filled week ahead.